Hello, everybody. My name is Chuck Hodgen. I am the System Support Librarian at Bunch Library, and we are going to today talk about podcasting. Specifically, how many of you, do you guys have a podcast? No? So are y'all thinking about getting started or just kind of interested in the process then? Mostly? Okay, cool. So that's good. I'm glad because most of the stuff we're going to talk about is going to be either for people who are thinking about getting into it or are relatively new to the podcasting game. There will be one or two things in here that, if someone was been doing podcasting for a few months or whatever, they still get a little something out of it, but I'm glad that most of the people here are new. And thank y'all for coming this morning. So let's go ahead and get into it. So before we talk about like the nuts and bolts of equipment and hosting and all that stuff, I think it's important to talk about brainstorming on the front end some critical components of what your podcast is going to be like. First of all, think about the content of your podcast. Seems very obvious, right? But drill down into it and think about what kind of topics your podcast is going to cover. How wide a range will it be? How wide a range will your appeal be? Are you going to be appealing to a broad set of fans or very hyper-specific kind of niche fandom? A fandom within a fandom. Because that'll affect how you kind of market your podcast once you're done making it, the places that you talk about it, and it will end up, you decide this on the front end, it will be better for you as you go. You don't want to get all your friends together and organize the meeting, and then once you sat down and turned the mics on, kind of stare at each other. Don't want that happening. Or maybe you do. Maybe that's the content, right? It's just organically free flow, because that's fine too. And also you want to think about who's going to be on your show. Will it be the same people every time? Will you need to get guests? Will you change it up? Because then that'll probably affect the recording schedule, and that's something to keep in mind when it comes to the continual drip feed of content that users absolutely want. So that is just a thing, again, to think about on the planning side when you come up with recording and release scheduling. But, equally important to the content, I think, is the structure of your podcast. It is very important. So, in some ways, this can affect the how your podcast is received just as much as the content. Are you going to be a podcast that covers current events, right? With news in a specific area, be it politics, games, sports, celebrity culture, whatever. Will that be what you are? Will you only talk about new stuff? Will you do deep dives on, maybe you sacrifice the current event because your recording schedule, you can't do it very regularly, but you want to take a particular thing, a game, a film, a book, and do a real deep dive into it. Also a very viable strategy. Those kind of podcasts can actually be good resources for people who are writing papers on things. Do you want to be an interview show where you just talk to interesting people that have to do with what you're podcasting about? Or do you want to take the narrative approach? I think this is it's not particularly new, but if I had to point to here's the latest evolution in podcasting, I think it's the narrative podcasts. If you haven't listened to those, you can look at Serial, or you can look at something like Night Vale. Those are very well known and been around for a while, and they're just these fictional podcasts. The construct will be, for Night Vale, it's a nightly radio broadcast about this fictional town and all the spooky things kind of happening in it, and you follow it like a story. what sort of show structurally we be, and how often we record. And like we talked about before, a structural thing to keep in mind is, are you going to be a free-form podcast, or will we be very scripted? Both approaches can work very well. The big difference is, do you want to put in a bunch of work on the front end or the back end, right? You script it out. Of course, it's a lot of prep work before you record, but after the recording session, there's not a lot you have to do. Some people might not think, I'm one of them, that that's as fun as free-form conversational style podcasting. However, that necessitates a lot more work on the back end in the editing process. Ums and uhs you have to cut out, tangents, someone says something that you don't want to put out there as part of your brand, that sort of stuff you'll want to edit out. So, lastly, as far as like brainstorming before we talk about equipment and such. So we talked a lot in the first few minutes like about abstract things, like think about kind of the content and structure abstractly, and that can be useful, and it is useful, but I think for a lot of people it's only useful to a point, and it's actually really beneficial if you go out and listen to a bunch of podcasts and you can see a lot of these abstractions in the wild. If you kind of broaden your palette, you'll see, again, all these various abstract ideas we talked about and others, and you can say, oh, okay, that's it. I want to do a podcast like Giant Bomb, only with my twist on it. Or, I want to do Radio Lab, but with my twist on it. And that can give you really solid, concrete ideas. And I would encourage listening to podcasts like if you want to do podcasts about politics, listen to podcasts about, video games too. Listen to podcasts about sports. Because many podcasts in kind of genres of content will, I find anyway, a lot of them will stick to similar formats, and it's just can be refreshing to hear different formats and give you different ideas for structuring content. But like how to find podcasts, right? Like how to find different ones, how to find good ones. An easy way is, if you listen to a lot of podcasts, usually not many episodes will go by in those podcasts before they recommend other podcasts. So that's a very easy way to kind of follow that trail, because you can listen to those people and then they will recommend something else, gosh, I've lost it. The Ringers Watch podcast will recommend Night Call, will recommend Night Vale, and you can see how it kind of goes. And it will widen your palette. You can also, of course, search Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and that's the goal of where you want to be, I think. Like, even though, more and more people are using other podcatchers and other resources and places to host their podcasts and look for their podcasts. I think by far this is still the biggest one. This is still the Amazon, so to speak, of podcasts, where you want your pod to be, and we'll talk about getting it there. And you can also search on SoundCloud. There's a growing number of podcasts on SoundCloud. Even though it's, independent music is its main focus, again, more stuff's popping up there. There's a site called instantwatcher.com that is sort of useful. It just searches, there's a podcast section and it searches the iTunes, Apple Pod database. But there's just some things that you can do with those results that I really have found that you can't kind of do in native iTunes. You can narrow down in different ways, look for pods that are a certain date old, drill down into different subjects in a different way. So that might be useful. If you end up paying for hosting on a site like Podbean or Podomatic, oftentimes, they'll plug you in and give you your own URL and put you into their database. But even if you don't, you can still look on their pages and kind of scroll through their databases, because they have their own categories and their own rankings that are different from iTunes. So that's like a way to find, what goes to the top of those lists. And of course, good old Google. Every content farm website out there, multiple times a year, I feel like someone will be tasked with writing an article. The 50 podcasts that you should listen to this year, or the top 10 wrestling podcasts, or 25 video game podcasts that you have to be listening to keep up with it. So these articles are out there. They're coming out all the time, and yeah, it's just a good way to find things people are listening to, new things that are good, that are popular, and all for primarily your enjoyment, but also for you as a podcast creator to grab ideas from. Okay, so let's talk about equipment. Now, the first thing I want to talk about may not seem very intuitive. You might not think of it as a piece of recording equipment for your podcast. The recording space is actually really, really important, and it directly affects your recording quality, and thereby indirectly impacts your editing efficiency and your content distribution timelines, right? Because if you pick a recording space that has a ton of ambient noise, which that's the pod killer for me, because I think there's a kind of moving line among podcast listeners of what they will tolerate in terms of subpar audio quality, but it really is a make or break. If your audio quality is real bad, then it almost doesn't matter what you have to say. People will find the content that they want elsewhere. So, more so than periodic loud noises, if you're recording in a room without ambient noise, but someone's baby cries, or there's a weird siren or a bang or whatever, it's real easy to just be okay, well, in the recording even, you can be all right, let's go back a couple minutes and re-say what we just said and start over. And then in post, you can edit that stuff out, and it's gone, no worries. But this pervasive ambient noise is harder to ignore and trickier to edit out. There are ways, and we'll talk about that briefly. But yeah, a fan, a ceiling fan, a computer fan, a lot of kind of a loud street outside, those things are very distracting. And again, when you edit them out, if you do it poorly, it can affect the recording quality, the quality of the entire recording. And so I find that is a bigger deal when talking about space than periodic loud noises. So you want to find a space that is relatively ambient noise free. Your microphone away from, computers and things like that as much as possible. Okay, so now to the obvious stuff. A big selling point of this convo, I feel, when I wrote up the description was how to do podcasting, how to be a podcast creator without spending a lot of money. And I'm going to discuss free options for things, as we go along the way. This is the one thing I think where you will probably have to spend some money, because as a person who also does not like to spend a lot of money on things, I've tried a lot of cheap microphones. I've tried to do recording there was a mic that came with my PlayStation 4 with the single earbud. Not good. I've I've tried a couple of other like real cheap headset mics. Just didn't give me the quality that I was looking for. Seemed to, even if the environment that I was recording in was relatively ambient noise free, the recording was still scratchy and seemed to create its own noise issues. So I would say here is probably like the biggest splurge part for creating a podcast that, again, like the recording quality is to an acceptable level. They say, like, I've heard from audio professionals that USB mics are no-no. And that's true. But for now, if you're just starting out, you can ignore that. Because whatever the drawbacks are, they are cheaper. You won't have to buy any additional equipment. And really, if you buy a decent one, you can achieve pretty good recording quality with minimal editing. What I have here is the Blue Snowball. And it's what I use for recording podcasts and this sort of thing. It's like $40 on Amazon. You know, if you wait for a sale, you can get it cheaper. I've even seen these at Walmart. You know, you're just like, I don't even want to wait for the Prime shipping. Just want to buy it. I think you can run to Walmart and pick this one up. But Blue makes some pretty good microphones. They have like a Yeti mic that is about 3 times more expensive. It's a quality mic, but I found that the Blue Snowball here actually gets the job done, and I'll share with you some, like, again, minimal editing tricks that you can do to mitigate the few drawbacks that it does have. Finally, as far as equipment, Audacity. Like, for me, as far as a free, and this is a free piece of software, and there's other things you can use, but man, for me, Audacity is an incredible, incredible program. So I edit my stuff in Adobe Audition, which is standard for like the radio industry, the standard piece of software. But honestly, I'd be hard pressed to come up with like a long list of things that it can do that Audacity, and I mix up those two, so forgive me if I accidentally say Audition when talking about Audacity. We're gonna talk about Audacity. Audacity can do basically everything that Audition can do. The menu, you know, where to do it might be a little different. You might have to download like a plugin or something. But it has the capability. It is a superb piece of software, extremely robust, and again, totally free. And I think getting easier to use all the time. So, and again, I know that there are other options, but this is totally the one that I would recommend as a free editing tool and recording tool. Okay, so we'll talk about editing here briefly. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so recordings can't always be flawless. It's a thing to get into your brain, right? Even if you do a heavily scripted show, like, you're gonna run into to mess ups. Someone's gonna fumble over a word, there's gonna be a pause, someone's gonna record in a room with ambient noise. All these things frequently come up when you're doing collaborations, especially with people, like a lot of my podcast recording, and this might not be the case for you. If you all can gather in the same room around a mic, that's a huge advantage. But a lot of people have to record over Skype or Discord or something like that. And that is where, like, you can have weird connection problems, delays, all that sort of thing that can impact the recording, that you'll need to do editing on the back end to mitigate that stuff. If you do record in that way, like if you are recording with people at a distance, or even if, you know, you're IRL friends with somebody and they have to be away the week you're meant to record and you